This is Paul.
Yeah.
It's 3:35, and I began researching.
Yeah. hmm
See, there seems to be this issue with obedience.
Yes. hmm
As Judge Landis had said, obey Clallam County no contact order.
Yes.
Now, I noticed that on the stipulation and order from Guam,
Yeah.
similar language.
Right.
Obey Washington State court orders.
Yeah. hmm
As if I were to disobey Washington State court orders, I would be in contempt because of the disobedience of not doing what the judge said. Now, there's a possibility that I could have violated personal recognizance if I hadn't appeared in court.
Yes.
And of course, they could arrest me for that. But if I had done something really stupid,
Yeah.
Judge Landis could have got upset and said, Paul, you know what I told you?
Yes.
I told you to obey the order. Now, just doing some research, what is contempt is the intentional disobedience of a court order.
Yes.
This is an example of parenting,
Yes.
violating the residential time in a parenting plan. One parent will not return the child to the other at the end of visitation.
Yeah.
And then the idea of you're refusing to enforce the stipulation
Yeah.
and order from the jurisdiction of Guam. Now, I'm sitting at the library kind of wondering when it said that the state of Washington will regulate.
Yes.
We're going to read it here in just a second.
Yeah.
What happens to me and my family once I'm in Washington State?
Yeah.
I don't think that you had the right to motion the court
Yes.
for dissolution of marriage unless you included the stipulation and order from the jurisdiction of Guam. Now, looking at the petition for dissolution of marriage,
Yes.
I was arrested for attempting to contact Healthy Families of Clallam County
Yes.
about the documentation from the Attorney General of Guam.
Yes.
And the stipulation and order of my right to fulfill what is known as diversion.
Yeah.
Well, instead of actually getting a copy of it,
hmm
they decided that they'd have me arrested for attempting to contact the petitioner. Now, since I didn't get any due process after my wife had motioned for a default dissolution of marriage,
Yes.
and I didn't get the actual final decree of dissolution of marriage,
Yeah.
is it an obligation to include the stipulation and order from Guam at any time that you exercise your jurisdiction as a court? Because I'm kind of thinking that you did have to do that.
Yes.
See, let's say you included it every time my wife motioned the court.
Yes.
This actual document right here, this binding stipulation and order,
Yes.
and the people of Guam versus Paul Chad Budnick,
Yes.
and I was in diversion,
Yeah.
and I was placed on unsupervised status and allowed to leave the island.
Yes.
And if I continued to perform satisfactorily during the period of diversion, at the end of the period of diversion, the criminal charges shall be dismissed upon motion of application defendant.
Yeah.
And then I would have qualified for the expungement too. Now, any contact that I was to have between myself, Mr. Budnick,
Yes.
and his wife and children will be regulated by the court in the state of Washington. Mr. Budnick shall obey the orders of the Washington court.
Yes.
Now, just reading this word obey,
Yeah.
um, I'm thinking that my obligation to obey your orders as a state required you to include the stipulation and order from Guam
Yes.
in the motioning of the court when you petition for dissolution of marriage. And then when you motion the courts before the 90 days had elapsed,
Yes.
would have been a requirement to have that stipulation and order included in that. And then when you had those parenting classes,
Yeah. Hmm.
the thought was that you have to include the stipulation and order. Now,
Hmm.
a lot of people would say, why?
Yes.
Why would you have to do that?
Hmm.
Let's say that you did include it, and I don't think you did because what was served on me at the time of the arrest didn't have the stipulation and order in it. No, no, no. And in your urgency
Yes.
to violate Washington state law's requirement that 90 days has to elapse,
Yes.
somehow I think my wife didn't include it. Oh. But at any time, any of the orders
Yes.
of the state of Washington were to be issued,
Yes.
and any contact that I might have had with my wife and children would have been regulated by the laws in the state of Washington, the court's laws.
Yeah.
Not having this means that I could have contempted the order and disobeyed the judge. Now, by my signature, the defendant attests that he has read this agreement and discussed it with his attorney.
Yeah.
Defendant enters the agreement freely and voluntarily.
Yes.
And you can see my name here, and I put that little C right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, why would the Guamanian jurisdiction want to include this stipulation and order with every order from the state of Washington?
Yes.
Well, I would think as a judge, though I'm not, but I'm trying to do that,
Yes.
disobeying any order would be a disobeying of the conditions of the stipulation and order.
Yes.
And from the time that you petition for the court case number of the dissolution of marriage, every time there was additional documentation admitted,
Yes.
parenting plan, temporary, oh. I don't think that any judge would ever want to give up their jurisdictional right
Yes.
to contempt somebody for disobedience. See, I don't think Judge Landis
Right.
was just being mean,
Yes.
like obey Clallam County, a no contact order.
Yes.
I think a lot of judges put that obey in
Yes.
for not only arresting me for violating the conditions of personal recognizance because I could have went to Brennan. Then they would have arrested me for violating personal recognizance.
Yes.
They said, well, Paul, don't go to Brennan.
Yeah.
You cannot have contact whatsoever with the complaining witness
Yes.
or witnesses listed below.
Hmm.
Now, it's interesting that the wording they use is witness instead of victim.
Yes.
As in, Heidi was going to say that I was in Jefferson County on June 16th of 2017. And that one of the co-workers of the Brennan School District received an email from me.
Yes.
She's the complaining witness, the accusing victim of violating the restraint provisions.
That's right.
Now, I go to Brennan. I get arrested for violating a condition of personal recognizance.
Yes.
You bring me back in front of Judge Landis, and she said, Paul, do you not see where it says obey?
Yes. Yes.
Not only did I get some sort of criminal charge for violating personal recognizance, Judge Landis decides to throw the book at me for disobedience.
Yes.
Now I'm a contempt of court for contempting a judge's order. Now, depending on what took place there, because I wasn't there on June 16th of 2017, I could have gotten criminal charges.
Yes.
The 2-count criminal complaint. Oh, that's right.
Yes.
Of violating the restraint provisions of the Clallam County no contact order.
Yes.
Cyber stalking a second time at a different date.
That's right.
2 gross misdemeanors. Violating the conditions of personal recognizance.
Yes.
And a big fat, you're Mr. Contempt, aren't you? You decided to be the disobedience, didn't you?
Yeah.
Now, let's say you're the jurisdiction of one.